Hey guys, a little bit of a different kind of video today as we take a look at a review of Outriders from a role player perspective. And you see the quotation marks I made with my claw hands. It means I'm not an actual role player like going to a tavern and talking in Elvish and creating a background for my character. What I mean in terms of role-playing for Outriders is myself and my teammates like to walk everywhere we go until it hits a combat situation and we need to jog. I like to enjoy the scenery, watch every cutscene, I do every side quest as it comes up, and I don't speed through any parts of the game, and like to appreciate it all as a whole. And I felt that role player fit that the most of everything I could think of in order to title this video. A couple things to note before we get started is, one, I have some baby chicks in the background incubating and they're starting to pip out of their shells, so you might hear some chirping. And number two, I am going to break down this review into certain sections and those will be timestamped. So if you're looking at seeing a certain part of the game and what I think about it, then you can go ahead and jump ahead to that and not listen to me ramble on. Before we jump into the review, however, I think it's important to cover a little bit of the games that I like to play or have played and what I think of them. That way you know what kind of perspective this review is coming from. And I'll just quickly recap the games in the same vein as Outriders that I have played. I have played hundreds of hours in the original Division. I absolutely love the original Division and had a blast while playing it. I've played the Division 2, and although I think the Division 2 had some entertaining parts to it, I think overall it was a disappointment compared to Division 1, and I think it butchered some of the core mechanics that made Division entertaining. I've played Ghost Recon Wildlands and absolutely love it as well. And I've played Ghost Recon Breakpoint and think it was pretty terrible at its launch. And I've gone back to it recently, and although I found it more entertaining, I still did not stick to it for very long. I've played every Mass Effect that matters. I'm looking at you, Andromeda. And thought the series as a whole was fairly good and well written. I think Part 2 is easily the best, and I think Part 3 was fairly lackluster. I have never played any of the Destinies, I have not played Warframe, and I think the game that Outriders reminds me of the most that no one else seems to be mentioning a ton is Tabula Rasa. I absolutely love Tabula Rasa, and I find that Outriders setting and environment, a little bit of their story, and primarily the classes and how their skills operate, remind me a ton of the game. And the game has a very similar vibe in its atmosphere. And that will kind of segue directly into the first area we're going to talk about, which is class choice and progression. I think Outriders did a phenomenal job creating 4 classes that work completely different than each other. You can equip the same style of guns and even play in a similar style of being close range or long range as someone else that's playing another class, and not feel anything like them. And at the same time, each class can fulfill each role fairly well, allowing each one to spec into firepower, defense, or their skills. Ability diversity through the ability to augment them through the mods in the crafting system is especially important and is what makes Outriders feel unique when you're playing your class. You could play the game through with 3 tricksters and have all of them operate completely differently and cover different roles in the group. I think Outriders did an amazing job at making the classes diverse through the skill tree, the gear you choose to equip, and the mod system. The only 2 things when it comes to classes and skills that I find a bit odd and not even necessarily a problem is that there's no lightning-based class, although they use the other 3 primary elements when it comes to skills. And I also find it a little bit odd that the Technomancer is mixed between Toxic and Ice, 2 things that don't necessarily go with each other, and I also feel like there was a complete class to be made with each of those on their own. We fight many enemies in the game that throw out poison grenades, and it seems that we could have put in some more Toxic and Poison style things in the 2 abilities given to us in order to create a class more built around the chemical side of things. And clearly, there's a ton of room to expand upon the ice abilities to make a class all on its own. Although it is possible that they were trying to avoid putting too many status effects into one area. But I do believe it could have been dealt with in a different way. All in all, as far as skills and classes go, I think Outriders did some of the best jobs I've seen in a looter shooter, especially when you compare their skills to other games like Division. I think that their skill sets were more diverse, and I love having to narrow down your abilities to just 3 out of the 8, and using your class tree and mods to augment them even further and to create more build diversity between 2 similar characters. The most important part of this being the mod system, which is their crafting system. I think their crafting system is very in-depth, and I believe they put a fun spin on the endless grind of looter shooters, always looking for that next piece of gear and that RNG roll, by allowing you to swap out certain mod slots and upgrading gear all the way from green up into purple. You still have to search for that certain roll and that certain look or secondary attributes that you want to get, But for the most part, they added a bunch of customization into the gear, allowing you to slightly tweak them and be able to get something more similar to your style. I do wish they would let us use resources to switch out one of the 3 attributes that roll on items, still making it to where you have to get that right roll, but giving us a little bit more to tweak with in order to get that perfect roll that we're looking for. And then obviously transmogrification or dying in some way would be an ideal situation, especially in a PvE game where the way you look is pretty much all up to you and doesn't have any effect on a PvP system. There are a great number of legendary armors even that I want to use the abilities or perks from, but I don't quite like the look of. They're very mystical and fantasy looking, but sometimes you just want something a little more down to earth or a little more rugged, especially in a post-apocalyptic game. While I think that their crafting system could use a little tweaks to make it a little bit better, it is one of the best mod systems and crafting systems that I've experienced in any looter shooter, and I'm glad they started the game out with a system like this, unlike the Division where they had to add it on later. Now on to the important part, being the storyline. We're not going to go into any spoilers in this, and I'm not even going to talk about any quests. All I'll say is I did very much enjoy the storyline, and it had me interested in what the outcome was going to be throughout pretty much the entire thing. There were a great number of side quests that all had good stories to them as well, especially as you progress to later parts of the game. They had side quests that drew on longer than other ones and felt as if they were the main story at some points because of how much they had going on in it and how much the characters were involved. And although I could do without the amount of language they had in the game, unfortunately is to be expected in a sci-fi or a military style game these days. All in all, with the story, I think it was excellently done. And there are some complaints out there about the amount of cutscenes and loading screens that you experience. However, as a huge fan of Final Fantasy XIV, I'm fairly used to cutscenes, and I quite enjoy cutscenes used to do storyline and to progress the quest along. I don't particularly like the way Elder Scrolls Online or any of the Elder Scrolls series does their story because they don't do any cutscenes, which I feel removes you from what's going on in the game and in the story at that moment by just having characters talk as we progress through gameplay. I also think Outriders did a phenomenal job with their difficulty system in the world tiers. Anytime you die in the world tier you're progressing on, you lose a little bit of progress in that world tier, and the only way to level up that world tier is to fight in it. Whereas if you're not interested in moving up in world tiers, you can play in a lower one and make no progress throughout your difficulty. And they really gave no downside to playing at a different world tier if you're just interested in seeing the story or progressing through the game. Play it at your own pace, and play it how you'd like to do it, and on the other side of it, if you'd like to push the limits and see how far you can go, the game allows you to do that. People progress at different points to different stages in the game. And there are a wide amount of skill levels of people playing the game, and any number of them can complete the story regardless of the difficulty of game they're playing. And I appreciated the way the drop-in and drop-out co-op worked with the world tiers. At one point, around level 20, I decided to change classes from Technomancer to Pyromancer, and was able to have my 2 friends come back and play with me and help catch me up with power leveling, yet they still got a decent amount of experience helping me along the way and some of their own loot while helping me with the lower quests. So People Can Fly have done a great job with the drop-in and drop-out system, making it worthwhile for friends to help each other while catching up, or simply giving you an incentive to play content with your friends that you may have already done. Which finally brings us to the end game. Now, so far to this point, you're probably assuming that this is a positive review for Outriders. And that was actually the case whenever I had finished the original story to the game. I had fully planned to make a good review for Outriders because I had a very enjoyable time. However, the end game of Outriders has completely changed all of that. Their expedition system is lacking and not very entertaining in a lot of ways. Throughout the entire story campaign and the original part of the game, you can choose how you want to take on any situation because of the world tier system. You can play tactical and slow, avoiding deaths and progressing through the game by being smart about your choices of when to use abilities and by using communication with your teammates. You can go all chaotic with it and go high damage and burn everything down as quickly as you can to try and progress through each mission and still progress your world tiers if you can avoid those deaths. However, once you get to the end game and expeditions, everything becomes a time-based event. It doesn't matter what you did before or how you played before. Playing tactical, using communication to time out abilities or skills doesn't exist anymore in the game at all. You get put into this mission and you have 6 minutes to get gold on it or 14 minutes to get gold, whatever it might be. Each mission can be placed differently. And sure, you don't have to get gold in order to progress through the game, but I'm still timed to get even silver or bronze and get lesser rewards. Eliminating any ability for a Technomancer who was a sniper and using ice abilities to control the battlefield to progress through this at all. Sitting there to line up that headshot on that boss is doing you no good since it's wasting your time. Devastators have an incredibly difficult time progressing through this game since the majority of their abilities are built around tanking and taking damage. The game completely removes its world tier system and doesn't even follow along it anymore with their challenge tiers when you're in Expedition. I'll say that even the monsters seem easier in the challenge tiers to kill than they did in the original game. Yet, because I'm timed on the event, I fail more and more often than I did in the original game, just because a clock is ticking. There's the argument that will always be made that you could change your spec or change how you play the game in order to progress and get gold. And that's true. You can't remove the meta out of any game. As much as you wish that it didn't exist or wasn't there, that will never be the case. The meta will always exist because people will always flock to what works best in a game. And I'm always someone that is going to avoid using whatever the meta is and try and come up with my own build. And I'm fully comfortable with the fact that maybe I can't achieve gold on these missions unless I go to whatever the meta currently is. But my problem is on a bigger scale than that. It's that fundamentally the game is completely changed once you reach max level. The entirety of the original game, you were able to take on the meta skills and go and melt through your opponents at whatever speed you like and as fast as you can. Or you could take the tactical approach using cooperation and teamwork and still complete the same missions, albeit at a slower pace. The expeditions completely eliminate this. You are actually punished in the game by not taking on the meta and trying to play tactical in any way. As I mentioned earlier in this review, I prefer to walk through the game and enjoy the scenery. This can't be done in the expeditions if you're looking to get any type of decent rewards. The expeditions are the first area in the game where I've had to sprint through locations and run through rooms without looking around them. And the joy of accomplishing and beating a fight in an expedition is almost completely removed by this timer. I've gotten up to champion tier 11 in the expeditions, and by no means am claiming that I'm good at the game even. I reached world tier 15 in the original game at level 28, and myself and my friends played the entire game together, and we did not wipe as a group since world tier 11. We progressed through the entire rest of the game after that without a single wipe as a group by playing tactical and using cooperation. This just doesn't exist and isn't even possible in Expeditions. At Champion Tier 11 Expeditions, I still have not even had a group wipe and play with very little deaths. Mobs even seem a little bit easier than they did in the original game. Yet because of the timer, I struggle to place bronze and silver most of the time because of the system People Can Fly have implemented. The game doesn't even resemble in Expeditions the way it did in the original game, and it seems that this could be fixed by simply increasing the difficulty or even increasing the number of mobs and boss mobs in the fights, but removing the timer. If you want to speed through the game and beat these on a super fast time, you have the ability to do that in the original game and in the Expeditions. But if you wanted to play tactically and slow and use cooperation and teamwork, those options have been taken away from you once you reach the end game. And one of the biggest problems I have with the way Expeditions operate is that Outriders themselves have misrepresented the game with some of their own videos. You can go to the Outriders YouTube page and they have a post-campaign content video that goes through and details some of the expeditions and how they work, how modding gear works and operates, and towards the end of the video, they give you some short gameplay footage of an expedition. Now you can see on the top left of the video, they're doing it at Challenge Tier 1, meaning it's as easy as it can get. But they misrepresent the game by showing their characters walking through it and enjoying the scenery, actually talking about the landscape and environment as they're going through, which just isn't possible if you're trying to get any type of rewards from the game. They misrepresent it in their own videos and they play it the way I would prefer to play it in their videos, but don't allow me to do that effectively when you actually reach the in-game content. Now with all my problems with the expeditions, that's not the only problem they have in the in-game. All of this could be taken away if you want to say that expeditions are a choice to take on and you don't have to progress through them. However, this argument also doesn't really hold up because once you've taken on expeditions in any way and increased your item level cap at all of the regular game content like side quests that you could repeat all remain at the level cap of 42, which means all the gear I would get from them cannot upgrade my character, and if I already had slightly upgraded equipment, all of the content is now easier than it was when I first arrived at level 30. This means that the only challenge that I can find is inside of expeditions, and the only gear upgrades I can find are inside of expeditions. On top of the fact that upgrading any equipment past level 42 requires drop pod resources from expeditions in order to upgrade your armor. This also forces me to do expeditions if I want to progress anywhere past level 42 in the game. They've given a technical level cap increase when you hit the in-game content, but have only given you one method to get there. or one method to progress through the game. The entirety of the original game and side missions, and the ability to repeat them for armor or gear, like you could do throughout your entire journey, is now removed. You cannot progress your character any farther than they already were, and you will be at a weaker power level than anyone who is taking on the expeditions. The only way to successfully take on expeditions and get decent loot from it is to take on the DPS meta. And the free choice that we've had to play the game how we would like, take it as slow or as fast as we'd like, and play it smart or play it reckless has completely been removed. Build diversity is mostly removed, and most of my joy and fun that I've had in the game has been removed now that I've gotten to Endgame. My opinion of Outriders has changed from incredibly positive to very mediocre in the matter of a couple of days. Reaching Endgame has been a huge disappointment and a huge letdown in terms of fun. And again, I don't care about being the most powerful or hitting speedruns, but playing the game tactically has gone completely out the window. Even to get a measly bronze and get rewards that are completely lackluster. You have to make a certain time frame to do it, and in order to reach this time frame, sniping, tactics, and slow play are completely gone and useless. I hope that this is something that People Can Fly are able to address and are willing to address, because at this point in the game, as much fun as the original game and storyline were, the endgame has completely ruined it for me. I've lost a lot of incentive to play the game, and would find myself spending a lot of time in expeditions to build up resources and hunt down legendaries, only to repeat content that's not even enjoyable. If I did end up putting the time into the expeditions to get equipped up and move past it, choosing to go back and play anything in the original game is simply not a challenge anymore because my gear level is so high. And doing them would be pointless since no gear can drop in them that is past level 42 in any way. Upgrading that gear would require me to do more expeditions in order to make it viable. So People Can Fly have created an awesome game until you reach max level, and then they have completely changed that game into a system that is not enjoyable or fun, requires only one DPS meta, has zero build diversity, and zero tactics. If you are someone who cares about storylines, engaging content, and beautiful scenery, then I recommend buying Outriders and playing it, if only for the main quest storyline and side quests. If you are someone who prefers to grind looter shooters and likes to play the content over and over, or if you are someone who likes tactics, build diversity, or cooperative team play, then I don't know if I can recommend it because the end game is lackluster in all of these categories. And the biggest downside of it is the expeditions could be entertaining and could be fun if only the timer was removed off of it and they use some other system to score whether or not you got gold, silver, or bronze. They already bring up a stat sheet at the end of it telling you your overall performance, and they could use this system to determine how well you did and reward you with appropriate content. Hopefully this review of Outriders gave you a good idea if it is the type of game for you, and ideally will let People Can Fly know that their in-game content is lacking. And from what I've seen, that is the opinion of many players in the community. Hopefully they can take a look at it, adjust it appropriately, and make it entertaining for a large portion of the player base. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.